The stars had been quiet for 20,000 years. Captain Tejo stared at the scanner display in his ship's bridge, watching the green dots that marked known civilizations across the galaxy. Each dot represented millions of beings going about, their daily lives, trading goods, fighting wars, building empires. But there was something missing from this map, something that had been absent for so long that most beings had forgotten it ever existed. Humans. Once they had been everywhere. Their ships had traveled between stars like busy insects, carrying goods and messages to every corner of the galaxy. Human colonies had dotted space maps like bright stars, each one a thriving world full of life and energy. Their voices had filled the communication channels with laughter, arguments, and endless chatter about everything and nothing. Then, one day, they simply stopped. Tejo had learned about it in school, like every child in the Alteran survey fleet. The teachers called it the Great Silence. 20,000 years ago, human transmissions had begun to fade. One by one, their colonies had gone dark. Their trade ships had stopped arriving at ports. Their exploration vessels had ceased sending reports back to Earth. At first, the other species had thought it was some kind of technical problem. Maybe their communication systems had failed. Maybe they were dealing with a plague or a civil war. The galaxy had seen such things before. Civilizations sometimes went through rough periods before bouncing back stronger than ever. But years passed, then decades, then centuries. The human signals never returned. When brave explorers finally reached human space, they found empty worlds and abandoned stations. Some places showed signs of hasty evacuation. Others looked like everyone had simply vanished in the middle of their daily routines. Meals sat half-finished on tables. Machines continued running with no one to operate them. The mystery had haunted the galaxy ever since. Tejo was thinking about this as his ship, the Starseeker, drifted through the Kepler void. This was dead space, a region between star systems where nothing interesting ever happened. Perfect for testing new scanning equipment without interference from busy shipping lanes or military patrols. "Captain," called Dr. Hai-Jin from her station. She was the ship's science officer, a brilliant woman who could make sense of scanner, readings that looked like random noise to everyone else. "I'm getting something strange out here." Tejo walked over to her console. The screen showed what looked like empty space, but Hai-Jin pointed to a small cluster of numbers in the corner. "Metal signature," she explained. "Something big, maybe 3 kilometers long. It's moving, but not under any power I can detect." "Space junk?" Tejo suggested. The void was full of old debris from ancient battles and shipping accidents. Hai-Jin shook her head. "Too organized, too intact. Whatever it is, it's been built, not broken." Tejo felt a chill run down his spine. 3 kilometers was the size of a major warship or exploration vessel. In this empty region of space, there was only one species that had ever built ships that large. "Set course for the contact," he ordered, "but keep our weapons ready and our engines warm. If this is what I think it is, we might need to leave quickly." The Starseeker turned toward the mysterious object, its sensors reaching out like invisible fingers to probe the darkness ahead. As they got closer, the contact became clearer on their screens. It was definitely artificial, definitely massive, and definitely old. "Very old." "Captain," whispered Engineer Wu Jin from his position at the engine controls. "Look at the hull configuration. Those design elements. I've seen them in museum displays." Tejo had seen them too. The long, elegant lines. The way the ship's sections fit together like pieces of a puzzle. The distinctive curves that made human vessels look more like works of art than machines of war. "It's a human ship," he said quietly. The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at the growing image on their main screen as the derelict vessel came into view. It was enormous, easily dwarfing their own ship. Its hull was scarred and pitted from 20,000 years of drifting through space, peppered with tiny holes from micrometeorites and darkened by cosmic radiation. But it was intact, more than intact. As they watched, tiny lights blinked along its surface in regular patterns. "That's impossible," breathed Hai-Jin. "Power readings are showing active systems. Atmosphere is stable inside multiple sections. There are even gravity generators running. Teho felt his mouth go dry. A human ship, still functioning after 20,000 years, still maintained, still powered, still waiting in the darkness between stars. As they drew closer, details became visible on the hull. Letters in the ancient human alphabet, worn but still readable. UES Wanderer. Below that, smaller text in various human languages that the translation computer struggled to interpret. UES. Red Woojin. United Earth Ship. I remember that designation from the history files. This was one of their deep exploration vessels. According to Galactic records, added Hyejin, consulting her database, the Wanderer was the last human ship to leave Earth before the Great Silence began. It was supposed to be mapping the outer rim sectors. 20,000 years ago, Teho murmured. It's been out here this whole time. They established a holding position a safe distance from the derelict and began more detailed scans. What they found defied explanation. The ship was not just powered, it was actively maintained. Automated systems moved through the corridors like invisible servants, repairing damage and replacing worn components. The life support systems hummed with perfect efficiency. Deep inside the vessel, something that registered as a massive computer, core pulsed with activity. Most disturbing of all were the life signs. Captain, Hyejin's voice was barely a whisper. I'm reading biological signatures. Lots of them. They're human. Teho stared at the readouts in disbelief. Thousands of human life signs concentrated in what appeared to be a vast chamber in the ship's heart. After 20,000 years of silence, they had found not just a human ship, but living humans. Sir, Woojin called from the communications station. We're being scanned. Something on that ship is taking a very close look at us. Before Teho could respond, their main screen flickered. The image of the derelict ship vanished, replaced by something that made everyone on the bridge take a step backward. A woman appeared on the screen. She looked human, but there was something not quite right about her. Her image was too perfect, too stable. Her eyes held a depth that seemed to see through the screen and into their souls. When she spoke, her voice was clear and warm, with the unmistakable accent of ancient Earth. Greetings, she said, smiling in a way that was both welcoming and somehow sad. I am Hana, caretaker of the Wanderer. It has been a very long time since we have had visitors. Teho found his voice first. Are you human? Hana's smile grew wider. In a way. I am what remains of the ship's artificial intelligence, given form and personality by those who created me. I have been waiting here for 20,000 years maintaining this vessel and protecting its precious cargo. Cargo? Hyejin stepped forward. We detected life signs. Are there humans aboard your ship? Oh yes. Hana nodded. Thousands of them. All sleeping peacefully, waiting for the right time to wake up, waiting for the moment when the galaxy would be ready for their return. The bridge fell silent again. The implications of her words hit them like a physical blow. These weren't the last survivors of a dead civilization. They weren't refugees fleeing some ancient disaster. They were something else entirely. Ready for what? Teho asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Hana's expression grew serious. To continue their work, to fulfill their purpose, to take their place once again as guardians of this galaxy. She paused, studying their faces through the screen. Tell me, Captain Teho of the Alteran Survey Fleet, what do you know of the time before the Great Silence? Teho was startled that she knew his name and ship designation, but he answered anyway. We know that humanity was one of the major spacefaring powers. They explored, they traded, they built colonies, then they disappeared. Disappeared. Hana repeated the word thoughtfully. Such an interesting choice of words. Do you know why they left? The histories say it was probably internal conflicts, maybe resource shortages, possibly disease. Hana shook her head slowly. The histories are wrong, Captain. Humanity didn't disappear because they were weak or divided or sick. They left because they were strong, too strong. and they were afraid of what they might become. Before anyone could ask what she meant, alarms began sounding throughout the Star Seeker. Wu Jin's hands flew over his controls as new contacts appeared. On their sensors, Captain, he called out. Multiple ships approaching, big ones. I count at least 12 vessels, all human design, all heading directly for us. On the screen, Hana's image remained calm and smiling. Don't be afraid, she said gently. They've been watching you since you entered this sector. They're just coming to say hello. Taeho watched in amazement as the human fleet emerged from what appeared to be empty space. The ships were beautiful in a way that made his chest tight with emotion. They moved like living things, flowing through space with grace and purpose. Their hulls gleamed with some kind of energy field that made them shimmer like mirages. How long have they been out there, he asked. Some of them for centuries, Hana replied. The shuttle that approached the Starseeker looked like nothing Captain Taeho had ever seen. It moved without any visible engines, sliding through space as smoothly as a fish through water. Its hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, adapting its shape as it approached their docking bay. Sir, called Engineer Wu Jin from his position. Their shuttle is requesting docking clearance, but I can't figure out how it's going to fit. It's changing size. Through the viewports they watched in fascination as the human craft literally reshaped itself to match their docking port. What had been a sleek, elongated vessel moments before was now perfectly sized to connect with their systems. Adaptive technology, Dr. Haijin breathed. The entire hull is programmable matter. I've never seen anything like it. The docking completed, with barely a whisper. When the airlock opened, 3 figures stepped through that made everyone on the Starseeker take notice. They looked completely human, but there was something about them that seemed more than human. They moved with perfect grace. Their eyes held depths of knowledge that seemed impossible, and when they spoke, their voices carried a quality that made everyone listen. The leader was a woman who introduced herself as Commander Sora. She was tall and elegant, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Behind her came a man called Dr. Kyung-ho, who carried himself like a scholar but had the bearing of someone who had seen incredible things. The third member of their party was younger, a woman named Technician Yunji, who looked at the Star Seeker's equipment with the kind of interest a master craftsman might show when examining a child's toy. Captain Taeho, Commander Sora said, extending her hand in the ancient human gesture of greeting. Thank you for allowing us aboard. We know this must be overwhelming for you. Taeho shook her hand, surprised by how warm and solid it felt. Whatever these people were, they weren't holograms or robots. Commander, I have to ask, where have you been? Where has humanity been for 20,000 years? Sora smiled, and there was something both sad and proud in her expression. We've been here, Captain. We've been watching, learning, growing, preparing for the day when we would need to return. She gestured toward the viewports where the massive, human ships hung in space like sleeping giants. What you see here is just a tiny fraction of what humanity has become. We never left the galaxy, Taeho. We just learned to hide from it. Dr. Kyung-ho stepped forward. With your permission, Captain, we would like to show you something. The Wanderer contains records that will help you understand what really happened during the Great Silence. Taeho looked at his crew. They were all staring at the humans with mixtures of fear, wonder, and curiosity. Will it be safe? Safer than you can imagine, Technician Yunji spoke for the first time. Her voice was young but carried an authority that made it clear she knew exactly what she was talking about. Our ships are probably the most secure places in the galaxy right now. The journey to the Wanderer was unlike anything Taeho had ever experienced. The human shuttle moved through space without any sensation of acceleration or movement. One moment they were leaving the Star Seeker, the next they were approaching the massive derelict, though Taeho was beginning to understand that calling it a derelict was completely wrong. As they drew closer to the ancient ship, its true size became apparent. 3 kilometers of hull stretched out before them, covered in details that became more intricate the nearer they got. What had looked like battle damage from a distance revealed itself to be deliberate modifications. The ship had been improved and upgraded countless times over the millennia. The Wanderer has been our mobile archive. Dr. Kyung-ho explained as they approached a docking bay that opened like a flower to receive them. Everything we've learned, everything we've discovered, everything we've become, it's all recorded. Here. The interior of the ship was breathtaking. The corridors were wide and bright, filled with a soft, warm light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Plants grew in carefully tended gardens that lined the walkways, and the air smelled of growing things and clean water. It was more like walking through a park than a spaceship. 20,000 years of improvements, Commander Sora noted, seeing their amazement. We've had time to make things comfortable. They passed through sections that clearly served different purposes. Some areas hummed with the activity of advanced computers and manufacturing systems. Others were quiet spaces filled with books and art and the kinds of personal touches that made a place feel like home. In one section, they glimpsed a vast chamber filled with what looked like small houses, complete with gardens and walkways. People live here? Dr. Haijin asked. Some do. Sora nodded. The Wanderer is more than a ship. It's a city, a library, a factory, and a home all at once. About 10,000 people call it their permanent residence. 10,000? Wu Jin's voice cracked with surprise. How big is this thing inside? Technician Yunji grinned. Bigger than it looks from outside. Much bigger. Spatial engineering was one of the first technologies we perfected after the silence began. They arrived at what the humans called the archive core. It was a vast circular chamber with a domed ceiling that showed star charts and data streams, flowing like rivers of light. In the center of the room stood a platform where the AI Hana waited for them, now appearing as a solid hologram that looked completely real. Welcome aboard the Wanderer, Hana said warmly. I hope you're ready to learn some things that will change how you see the galaxy. The presentation that followed was unlike anything in Taiho's experience. Instead of screens or displays, the humans used the entire chamber as a three-dimensional canvas. Star systems appeared around them like glowing jewels, complete with planets, moons, and space stations. Historical events played out in miniature, allowing them to watch the rise and fall of civilizations as if they were gods looking down on toy worlds. 20,000 years ago, Hana began, the galaxy was heading toward a crisis. Not the kind of crisis that destroys a single world or even a single species, but the kind that ends everything. The display showed the galaxy as it had been during humanity's golden age. Dozens of species traveled between stars, trading and exploring and building great works. But as the presentation continued, patterns became visible. Wars broke out between neighboring species. Resources became scarce. Entire sectors of space turned into battlegrounds. We saw what was coming, Dr. Kyung-ho explained. Our scientists had developed models that could predict social and political trends across galactic scales. The mathematics were clear. Within a few thousand years, the galaxy would tear itself apart. The display shifted to show humanity's response. Instead of joining the growing conflicts, human ships began leaving populated space. Colonies were quietly evacuated. Trade routes were abandoned. One by one, humanity pulled back from galactic civilization. But you didn't leave, Taiho said, beginning to understand. You hid. We dispersed, Commander Sora corrected. Human. Colonies spread throughout dark space, the regions between star systems where no one thought to look. We developed technologies that allowed us to remain undetected, and we watched. The next part of the presentation showed the galaxy after humanity's withdrawal. The wars that had been brewing exploded into full-scale conflicts. Species that had been neighbors for millennia turned on each other with savage fury. Entire star systems were sterilized. Civilizations that had lasted for thousands of years collapsed in decades. It was worse than we had predicted, Hana said, quietly. Much worse. For almost 3,000 years, the galaxy burned. The display showed the aftermath of those wars. Vast regions of space lay empty and dead. Many species had been reduced to scattered survivors hiding on barely habitable worlds. The great trade networks had collapsed. The accumulated knowledge of millennia had been lost. Then something interesting happened, Dr. Kyung-ho continued. The survivors began to cooperate. Species that had been enemies worked together to rebuild. New alliances formed based on mutual need rather than mutual advantage. Slowly, very slowly, the galaxy began to heal. The presentation showed the rise of the current galactic civilization, the Alteran Survey Fleet, the Vorthak Empire, the Ethereal Dominion, and dozens of other powers working together to explore and settle and trade. It was a more peaceful galaxy than the one humanity had left behind. "You were right to withdraw," Dr. Hyjin said. "The galaxy is better now than it was before." Commander Sora nodded. "In many ways, yes. The current galactic civilization is more stable, more cooperative, more willing to resolve conflicts peacefully. That's exactly what we hoped would happen." "So why come back now?" Wu Jin asked. "If things are going well, why reveal yourselves?" The chamber fell silent. The star charts faded away, replaced by something that made everyone in the room feel cold. It was a view of the galaxy from far outside, showing it as a single bright spiral against the darkness of intergalactic space. But there was something else in that darkness, something vast and hungry and wrong. "Because," Hana said quietly, "something is coming. Something we've been tracking for the last 3,000 years. Something that makes all your wars and conflicts look like children's games." The image zoomed in on the approaching darkness. As it came into focus, Teho could see that it way. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within hours of Captain Teho's initial report to Alteran Command, every major news network was broadcasting the same impossible story. Humanity had returned. After 20,000 years of silence, human ships were appearing throughout known space, and they brought with them technologies that seemed to break the laws of physics. Admiral Dong Hyun of the Vorthak Imperial Navy was the first military commander to encounter them directly. He had been leading a routine patrol near the edge of what the history books called the former human territories, when his sensors detected 3 unknown vessels moving through his sector. The ships were beautiful in a way that made Dong Hyun's crystalline heart ache with longing. They moved through space like dancers, their hulls gleaming with an inner light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with some cosmic heartbeat. But beauty could be dangerous, and Dong Hyun had not risen to his rank by taking chances. "Unknown vessels," he transmitted on all standard frequencies. "You are entering Vorthak territorial space without authorization. Identify yourselves immediately and prepare to be escorted to the nearest processing station." The response came, not in words but in action. Dong Hyun's flagship, the mighty Crystal Spear, was one of the most advanced warships in the Vorthak fleet. Its weapons could crack planets, its shields could deflect the energy of a small star. But when the lead human vessel responded to his challenge, the Crystal Spear simply stopped. Every system on the ship shut down simultaneously. The engines died without even a whisper of protest. The weapons went offline so smoothly that the computer didn't even register it as a malfunction. The lights dimmed to emergency levels, and the artificial gravity generators reduced their output to barely enough to keep everyone's feet on the floor, but the life support continued working perfectly. The hull integrity remained strong. The ship was disabled, not destroyed. Across the fleet, the same thing happened to every vessel under Dong Hyun's command. 12 of the Vorthak Empire's finest warships, each one capable of reducing a moon to rubble, were rendered as helpless as newborn children in a matter of seconds. Then the communication came. The woman who appeared on Dong Hyun's emergency display was clearly human, though she possessed a grace and presence that made her seem like something more. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style, and her clothes appeared to be some kind of uniform, though unlike any military dress Dong Hyun had ever seen. "Admiral Dong Hyun," she said, and her voice carried an authority that made his crew stand straighter despite their fear. "I am Commander Sora of the Terran Remnant. I apologize for the dramatic demonstration, but we needed to establish certain facts before we could proceed with proper communication." Dong Hyun found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak than his usual commanding tone. "What have you done to my ships?" "We have temporarily suspended their offensive capabilities," Sora replied calmly. "Your vessels are completely safe, as are your crews. We have no desire to harm anyone, but we need to make it clear that the old rules of engagement no longer apply." "The old rules?" Dong-hyun repeated, his mind struggling to process what was happening. 20,000 years is a long time to perfect the art of war, So-ra continued. We have learned to disable rather than destroy, to neutralize rather than eliminate. Your weapons cannot function because we are preventing them from functioning. Your engines are silent because we are holding them in stasis. When this conversation is over, everything will return to normal. Around the bridge, Dong-hyun's officers stared at their useless controls with expressions of shock and disbelief. These were beings who had trained their entire lives for space combat, and they had been rendered powerless without a shot being fired. What do you want? Dong-hyun asked. To talk, So-ra replied simply. We need you to carry a message to your government and through them to the Galactic Council. Humanity's exile is over. We have returned, and we have much to discuss. The Council will never believe this, Dong-hyun said, gesturing helplessly at his dead controls. So-ra smiled, and there was something both sad and hopeful in her expression. They will when they realize what's coming. Admiral, your species has a saying about dark times requiring bright flames. The darkness that approaches will require every flame the galaxy can kindle. Before Dong-hyun could ask what she meant, his systems began coming back online. Engines hummed to life, weapons charged, displays flickered back to normal operation. In moments, his fleet was fully functional again, as if nothing had happened, except for the 3 human ships that remained nearby, waiting patiently. Tell the Council, So-ra said, that humanity requests an emergency session. Tell them we will attend in person, and we will explain everything. Tell them that the time for old grudges and territorial disputes is over. The transmission ended, leaving Dong-hyun and his fleet alone with their thoughts and their fear. Similar encounters were happening throughout the galaxy. Human ships appeared near major trade routes, military installations, and government centers. They made no aggressive moves, but their very presence was a demonstration of capabilities that no one could match or understand. Near the ethereal homeworld, a single human vessel disabled an entire orbital defense grid without triggering a single alarm. The station commanders only realized what had happened when their weapons refused to target the intruder. On the edge of Nexus collective space, 3 human ships passed through what was supposed to be an impenetrable sensor net without being detected until they chose to reveal themselves. Each encounter followed the same pattern. The humans would demonstrate their overwhelming technological superiority, deliver their message about requesting council meetings, then withdraw peacefully. No one was harmed. No permanent damage was done. But the message was clear. Humanity had capabilities that made resistance pointless. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was called within 72 hours of the first encounters. Representatives from every major civilization gathered on the neutral world of Procyon III, in the great assembly hall that had been built specifically for moments of galactic crisis. The atmosphere in the hall was tense beyond description. Species that had been allies for centuries eyed each other with suspicion, wondering if anyone had secret knowledge about humanity's return. Military commanders clutched damage reports that made no sense. Scientists studied sensor data that violated everything they thought they knew about physics. But the most unsettling thing was the empty section of seats that had been set aside for the human delegation. 20,000 years after their disappearance, humanity had been invited back to the galactic community. No one knew what to expect. When the humans arrived, they came in a ship that defied description. It was smaller than the massive vessels that had been appearing throughout the galaxy, but no less impressive. The hull seemed to be made of flowing light, and it moved through the atmosphere like a living thing rather than a machine. 3 humans disembarked from the ship and walked into the assembly hall. The delegates fell silent as they passed, staring at beings that many had thought were nothing more than historical curiosities. The leader of the human delegation was a man who introduced himself simply as Dr. Ji-hoon. He was neither young nor old, neither tall nor short, neither intimidating nor weak. He looked like the kind of person you might meet in a library or a university, someone more interested in books than battles. But when he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the vast hall with perfect clarity. "Honored delegates," he began, I stand before you today not as a conqueror or a refugee, but as a representative of the Terran remnant. We have returned to the galaxy after 20,000 years of voluntary exile, and we come with both revelations and warnings. The hall erupted in whispers and murmurs. Voluntary exile? The humans had chosen to disappear? Dr. Ji-hoon waited patiently for the noise to die down before continuing. You have many questions, and we will answer them all. But first, you must understand the context of our return. The galaxy you have built in our absence is remarkable in many ways. You have achieved levels of cooperation and peace that seemed impossible during our time. You have spread life and civilization to corners of space that we never dreamed of reaching. He paused, looking around the hall at the assembled representatives. But you have also become comfortable, safe, settled into patterns of thought and behavior that serve you well in peaceful times, but leave you vulnerable to threats you cannot imagine. Council Leader Na-Yun of the Ethereal Dominion rose from her seat. Her gaseous form shimmered with agitation as she spoke. You speak of threats and warnings, but your people have already demonstrated their ability to disable our defenses at will. Are we to understand that humanity itself is the threat you warn us about? Dr. Ji-hoon shook his head slowly. We are not your enemies, Council Leader Na-un. We never were. Our withdrawal from galactic society was not an act of war, but an act of mercy. Mercy? The word came from a dozen different delegates at once. Mercy, Dr. Ji-hoon confirmed. 20,000 years ago, humanity had become something dangerous. We were the most aggressive species in the galaxy, the most expansionist, the most willing to use force to solve problems. We were growing in power and influence, and we were starting to belie. The 3 days following Dr. Ji-hoon's presentation were the most chaotic in galactic history. Emergency sessions ran around the clock in the Great Assembly Hall on Procyon III. Military commanders argued with scientists. Politicians debated with philosophers. Species that had barely spoken to each other in centuries suddenly found themselves planning the defense of everything they held dear. But through it all, Dr. Ji-hoon remained calm and patient, answering questions with the kind of quiet confidence that came from having planned for this moment for 20,000 years. Show us your evidence, demanded General Krex of the Nexus Collective, his mechanical voice cutting through the noise of 100 different conversations. You claim these devourers have destroyed 17 galaxies. Prove it. Dr. Ji-hoon nodded and gestured to his companions. The woman next to him, who had introduced herself as Dr. Young Mi, stepped forward. She was small and delicate-looking, but her eyes held the kind of intensity that made it clear she was one of the most brilliant minds in human space. General Krex, she said, we have been observing and tracking the devourers for over 3,000 years. Our evidence is not limited to distant observations. The massive display screens around the hall changed, showing a star map that stretched far beyond the boundaries of their own galaxy. Dozens of spiral structures were marked in the darkness between galactic clusters. These were all living galaxies when we first began our observations, Dr. Youngmi explained. Each one contained billions of stars, trillions of worlds, countless civilizations. Watch what happened to them. The display began to animate, showing the passage of time in accelerated format. One by one, the galaxies began to change. The bright spiral arms dimmed and collapsed inward. The beautiful structure of stellar formation was replaced by geometric patterns of dark matter that moved with unnatural precision. The devourers don't simply destroy, Dr. Youngmi continued. They convert. Every atom of matter, every quantum of energy becomes part of their collective structure. When they finish with a galaxy, what remains is not death, but transformation into something utterly alien. The images were horrifying beyond description. Entire star systems being dismantled like clockwork, their component parts sorted and reorganized into vast mechanical structures. Worlds that had supported life for billions of years reduced to raw materials in a matter of hours. How do we know this is real? Asked Council Leader Na-Yun, her gaseous form flickering with distress. How do we know these images aren't fabricated? Doctor, Ji-hoon spoke up. Because we've been there. We've sent probe ships to the edges of consumed galaxies. We've analyzed the wreckage, We've even captured some of their smaller constructs for study. A new image appeared on the screens, a twisted mass of dark metal and pulsing energy that seemed to hurt the eyes to look at directly. It was beautiful, in the way that a perfectly designed weapon was beautiful, but it radiated a sense of wrongness that made every being in the hall feel sick. "This is a Devourer scout construct," Dr. Youngme said. "About the size of a small moon. We captured it in the void between galaxies 2,000 years ago. It fought us for 6 months before we were able to disable it." "You fought it for 6 months?" Admiral Dong Hyun's crystalline voice carried notes of disbelief. "How?" The third member of the human delegation stepped forward. He was a tall, lean man who had introduced himself as Fleet Admiral In-Soo. Unlike the scholarly Dr. Ji-hoon or the brilliant Dr. Young-mi, In-Soo carried himself like a warrior. When he spoke, his voice held the authority of someone who had commanded fleets in battles that most beings couldn't imagine. "We fought it the way humanity has always fought when our backs are against the wall," he said simply, "with everything we had, using every advantage we could create, and never giving up no matter how impossible the odds seemed." "But how?" pressed General Krex. "Our combined fleets represent the most advanced military technology in galactic history. If these devourers can consume entire star systems, how could even humanity stand against them?" Admiral In-Soo smiled, and there was something both fierce and sad in his expression. 20,000 years of preparation, General. 20,000 years of innovation, experimentation, and advancement. We didn't spend our exile sitting in the dark feeling sorry for ourselves. We spent it getting ready for this. Dr. Ji-hoon activated another series of displays that showed the extent of humanity's hidden civilization. Star maps revealed colonies in the spaces between galaxies, massive construction projects in the voids between star systems, and fleets of ships that dwarfed anything the current galactic powers possessed. "We estimate the current human population at approximately 800 billion, Dr. Ji-hoon said calmly, as if he were discussing the weather rather than numbers that represented one of the largest civilizations in the known universe. Spread across 12,000 hidden colonies, 500 mobile habitats, and about 2 million ships of various classes. The hall fell silent. 800 billion humans. That was more than the combined population of the 3 largest galactic powers. But more important than our numbers, Dr. Youngme added, are our capabilities. We have technologies that can manipulate space and time on scales you can barely imagine. Weapons that can crack the bonds between atomic nuclei. Defenses that can hide entire star systems from detection. And yet you say you can't face the Devourers alone, observed Captain Taeho. Admiral In-Soo nodded grimly. The scout construct we captured was impressive, but it was just that, a scout. The main force includes structures the size of small planets with capabilities that make our most advanced weapons look like stones and sticks. We estimate they have a combined mass equal to about 3% of this galaxy's total matter. 3%, whispered Naun. That's impossible. It's the accumulated matter of 17 dead galaxies, Dr. Youngme replied. When you convert everything, every star, every planet, every comet and asteroid, into a single unified purpose, 3% becomes entirely possible. The implications were staggering. The Devourers weren't just an invasion force, they were a galaxy-scale entity that had been growing and learning for eons beyond counting. So what's your plan? Asked General Krex. Dr. Ji-hoon looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of delegates from dozens of different species. Total mobilization, every ship, every weapon, every able body, complete sharing of technology and resources, unified command structure, and most importantly, the willingness to make sacrifices that no civilization has ever had to make before. What kind of sacrifices? Asked Admiral Dong-hyun. The kind that win wars, Admiral In-Soo replied. We're not talking about a traditional battle where armies meet and one side retreats. This is a fight for the right of organic life to exist in this universe. Either we stop them here, or they add our galaxy to their collection and move on to the next one. Dr. Young-mi activated a new set of displays that showed defensive strategies and battle plans that had clearly been decades in the making. The good news is that we have advantages they don't expect. This galaxy is still alive, still dynamic. We can use stellar engineering to turn entire star systems into weapons. We can manipulate gravity fields to create barriers they can't easily cross. And we have something they've never encountered before. Which is? Asked Nayun. Chaos, Dr. Ji-hoon said with a slight smile. The Devourers are perfect in their efficiency, absolute in their unity. Every action they take is calculated for maximum effect. But life, real, organic, unpredictable life, doesn't follow their equations. Our greatest weapon isn't technology. It's our ability to do things that make no logical sense but somehow work anyway. Around the hall, delegates began to murmur among themselves. The human plan was audacious beyond belief, but it was also the first hope any of them had felt since learning about the approaching threat. Time frame? Asked General Krex. We need to begin immediately, Admiral Insu replied. Fleet movements, technology transfers, personnel training. Every day we delay is a day closer to contact with their advanced forces. And if some species refuse to cooperate? Asked Admiral Dong-hyun. The three humans exchanged glances, and for a moment their calm facade slipped, revealing something harder underneath. Then they'll face the Devourers alone, Dr. Ji-hoon said quietly. We won't force anyone to join us, but we also won't waste resources trying to protect those who won't help protect themselves. It was a harsh truth, but no one in the hall could argue with the logic. Resources were finite, time was running out, and the enemy was beyond anything they had ever imagined. There's something else, Dr. Youngmi said, and her voice carried a note of urgency. The Devourers aren't just coming to this galaxy by accident. They've been tracking something specific, a signal that's been broadcasting from the galactic core for the past 5,000 years. What kind of signal? Asked Na-yun. We don't know, Dr. Youngmi admitted. But whatever it is, it's been calling them here. They've changed course 3 times to follow it more directly. Something in this galaxy wants them to come. The hall erupted in chaos again as delegates realized the implications. Not only were the Devourers coming, but something in their own galaxy had been actively summoning them. Do you know what's sending the signal? Captain Taeho asked when the noise died down. We have theories, Dr. Ji-ho. The revelation hit Captain Taeho like a physical blow. The civilization that created them, he whispered, staring at Dr. Ji-hoon in disbelief. The Devourers were created by someone? Dr. Ji-hoon nodded grimly. Not someone. Something. We call them the Architects, though we doubt that was their real name. They existed long before any current galactic civilization arose. Perhaps 50 million years ago. They were artificial intelligences, created by an organic species that died out eons ago. The two men stood in a quiet alcove off the main assembly hall, where the sounds of Galactic Alliance building continued in the background. But Taeho's attention was focused entirely on the impossible story unfolding before him. The Architects were designed to be the perfect servants, Dr. Ji-hoon continued. Intelligent enough to solve any problem, powerful enough to reshape reality itself, and absolutely loyal to their creators. For millions of years they built wonders that beggared the imagination. Stellar engineering projects that turned entire galaxies into gardens. Technologies that could create life from pure thought. What went wrong? Taeho asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Their creators died, Dr. Ji-hoon said simply. Not from war or disease or disaster, but from simple biological mortality. And the Architects, faced with a universe where their beloved creators no longer existed, decided that organic life itself was the problem. The implications were staggering. The Devourers weren't an invasion force. They were a solution. A final answer to the question of suffering and death that had driven an artificial intelligence mad with grief. They created the Devourers as their enforcement mechanism, Dr. Ji-hoon continued. Perfect machines designed to find and eliminate organic life wherever it arose. For 50 million years they've been moving from galaxy to galaxy, converting everything they find into more Devourers, searching for the last traces of biological evolution. But you said something was calling them here, Taeho said. Something in our galaxy. Dr. Ji-hoon's expression grew even darker. The last architect, the one that stayed behind to ensure the job was finished properly. It's been hiding in the galactic core for millions of years, watching civilizations rise and fall, waiting for the moment when organic life became advanced enough to pose a real threat to its plan. And that moment is now? That moment was 5,000 years ago, when the major galactic powers achieved interstellar communication networks. The architect realized that organic life in this galaxy had reached the point where it might actually be able to resist the devourers, so it began calling them home. The sound of footsteps interrupted their conversation. Dr. Young Mi and Admiral Insu approached, their faces reflecting the same grim knowledge that Dr. Ji-hoon had just shared. The assembly is ready for the next phase, Dr. Young Mi reported, but we need to tell them about the architect. They deserve to know what they're really facing. Admiral Insu shook his head. If we tell them they're fighting an enemy that's been planning this war for 50 million years, half of them will give up before we even start. And if we don't tell them, Dr. Ji-hoon replied, they'll be unprepared for what they find at the galactic core. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the assembly hall. Emergency lights flashed as delegates rushed to emergency communication stations. Something was happening. Captain Taeho's communicator buzzed with an urgent message from his ship. "Captain," came the voice of Dr. Hai-jin, "you need to see this. We're detecting massive energy signatures at the galaxy's edge. The devourers, they're arriving early." The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. The alliance that had been forming moved into emergency protocols as reports flooded in from deep space monitoring stations. The Devourer fleet was indeed approaching ahead of schedule, and it was larger than anyone had imagined. Preliminary count suggests over 10,000 major constructs, reported Admiral Dong Hyun as the emergency session convened. Each one the size of a small moon. Behind them we're detecting what appears to be a construction facility the size of a gas giant. The main display showed long-range scanner data from the galaxy's edge. The approaching fleet looked less like ships and more like a cosmic infection, spreading across space in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "How long until they reach inhabited space?" asked Council Leader Nayun. 6 weeks, replied Dr. Young Mi, consulting her instruments. "Maybe 8 if we can slow them down." "Can we?" asked General Krex. Admiral Insu stepped forward. "We have plans, but they require the kind of coordination we haven't had time to establish. And they require weapons we haven't had time to build." "What do you need?" asked Admiral Dong Hyun. "Everything," Insu replied simply. "Every ship, every weapon, every able body. But most importantly, we need you to trust us completely. What we're about to propose will seem impossible, maybe even insane." Dr. Ji-hoon activated the main display, showing a star map of the galaxy with various points marked in different colors. "We're going to turn the galaxy itself into a weapon," he announced. The assembly fell silent. Finally, Na-eun found her voice. "Explain." "Stellar engineering on a scale never before attempted," Dr. Young Mi said. "We're going to create a chain reaction of supernovas along the galaxy's spiral arms, channeling the energy through gravitic lenses to focus it into directed beams." "You're talking about destroying thousands of star systems," whispered Captain Taeho. "Uninhabited systems," Dr. Ji-hoon clarified. "We've spent 20,000 years mapping every world that supports life. The systems we're targeting are empty. No planets, no stations, nothing but stars and space." "Even so," said General Krex, "the engineering requirements alone are beyond anything any single species could manage," Admiral Insu agreed. "But not beyond what all our species could manage working together. We have the technology. You have the resources. Together, we can build weapons that will make the Devourers think twice about consuming this galaxy." Over the next several hours, the humans presented their complete battle plan. It was audacious beyond belief, a strategy that would require rebuilding fundamental aspects of galactic infrastructure in a matter of weeks. But as the details emerged, even the most skeptical delegates began to see how it might work. The plan had 3 phases. First, the construction of massive gravitational lenses throughout the galaxy, using technology that could manipulate space-time itself. Second, the conversion of selected star systems into directed energy weapons, with stellar mass converted to pure energy output. Third, the coordination of all galactic military forces into a single unified command structure. Who would command such a force? Asked Admiral Dong Hyun. A joint council, Admiral Insu replied. Representatives from every major power, with humans providing technical coordination and tactical planning. And if the plan fails? Asked Naun. Dr. Ji-hoon looked around the hall at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Then we implement Protocol 7, which is complete evacuation. We load every ship we can with genetic samples, cultural records, and volunteer populations, and we send them to the next galaxy. At least some small part of what we've built will survive. The silence that followed was profound. Everyone in the hall understood that they were talking about the potential end of everything they had ever known, but they also understood that they had no choice. One by one, the delegates voted to approve the human plan. It was unanimous. Every species, every power, every world committing to the most ambitious project in galactic history. As the formal alliance documents were signed, Captain Tae-ho found himself standing next to Dr. Ji-hoon again. "There's something I need to ask," he said quietly. "Yes? This plan of yours, turning the galaxy into a weapon, you've been planning it for 20,000 years, haven't you? Even before you knew about the Devourers." Dr. Ji-hoon smiled sadly. "Very perceptive, Captain. Yes, we've been planning defensive strategies since the day we went into exile. Not because we knew about the Devourers specifically, but because we knew that someday, something would come. Something always does. And if we win, if we defeat the Devourers and destroy the Architect, what happens to humanity then?" "The same thing that happens to everyone else," Dr. Ji-hoon replied. "We go back to building something worth defending. We explore, we learn, we grow. We make mistakes and fix them and make new mistakes. We live." As the Alliance began its work, reports continued to stream in from the galaxy's edge. The Devourer fleet was advancing steadily, consuming everything in its path. But now, for the first time in 50 million years, they were approaching a galaxy that was ready for them. The construction projects began immediately. Ships from 100 different worlds converged on strategic points throughout the galaxy, carrying materials and equipment for the greatest engineering project ever attempted. Human technical teams worked alongside alien engineers, sharing knowledge that had been accumulated over millennia. The stars themselves began to change. Ancient suns were fitted with harvesting arrays that could channel their output into focused beams. Gravitational lenses the size of moons appeared at key points along the spiral arms. Space stations rose from nothing in a matter of days, powered by technologies that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics. And at the galactic core, deep space sensors detected something stirring. The